Hello aspirants, so let's get started. Welcome to UPSC Geek by NRG, and I am very thrilled to see some of your feedbacks and overwhelming regards regarding my previous playlist and lectures on various topics, and especially PSIR optionals. And I have also come up with many feedbacks which especially requested me to come up with a lecture series on ethics, because the problem the aspirants usually find is that they don't have any holistic perspective about ethics. Most of the lectures that are available on any social media like YouTube's and etc are very theoretical oriented, right? So aspirants have requested me, sir, that you should make a special series on ethics as well. So with this request and honoring the lovely regards of my fellow friends and aspirants, I have come up with this ethics lecture series which will be very holistic in nature and very much practical oriented. This will be more of a practical ethics, right? Because in later slides we will be seeing how holistic and 360-degree perspective oriented ethics has become. It is not just asking direct questions in the exam. There are relatedly very practical and pragmatic approach to ethics which is being taken into consideration in today's exams. Okay, so with this, let's get started, aspirants. And before moving further, make sure to subscribe to the channel, that is UPSC Geek by NRG, and also like the video. Okay, so what is the syllabus? You guys might be aware the first main topic is ethics and human interface. The second is attitude, very important thing, right? So attitude is basically our general evaluation of the world around us, like how we see at things, right? Mainly people get confused between attitude and the normal lingual attitude that we use, that you have so much of attitude and etc. But this attitude is not the same as the lingual attitude that we use in our day-to-day speaking, right? So this attitude is very psychological oriented, that is our way of evaluation of the world around us. And third is aptitude and foundational values for civil services. So we will be saying different words like integrity, impartiality, non-partisanship, and etc. And in later slides we'll also be seeing how the different portions of questions are asked in different manner and different proportionality, right? So with this, the fourth topic is emotional intelligence. Again, very important topic to learn about, especially for the civil servants, right? Like we know how the journey of civil services and even this preparatory phase of civil services becomes very imperative for us to have the emotional intelligence in order to sustain the turbulence of emotions that we go through the preparatory phase and even in the services, from the personal issues like relationship issues to all the emotive turbulences that we face through in our day-to-day lives, right? So for this, for that particular sort of issues, you will be able to know some basic concepts about what emotional intelligence is all about, and you will necessarily take a step in order to make your life a little bit more sorted so that you can perform well and efficiently when it comes to preparation for the UPSC civil services exam. Okay, the fifth is the contribution of moral thinkers and philosophers from India and world. We will be seeing various philosophers from Greeks to present times, such as Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and etc., till the very recent times like Gandhiji's, Buddha's, and etc. So around India, from India and world, right? So that is the fifth topic. The sixth is public services and public/civil services values and ethics in public administration. Okay, the seventh is probity in governance, and eight is case studies on above issue. This is more or less sums up the entire syllabus of ethics, that is GS4 paper. Okay, so let's do some of the PYQs analysis, because before stepping into the concepts, before stepping into the subjects, it is very important for us to know what is the direction, right direction to head for the particular goal, right? So until and unless we don't know the important portion or parts of the ethics, that is GS4, we will not be able to tackle it efficiently, right? So there are basically four broad categories of questions that are being asked when it comes to GS4, right? Ethics. So the first type of question is keyword based. Like they will give you a particular type of keyword, right? Like what is constitutional morality, what is conflict of interest, what is property in the public life, right? What is devotion to duty, and etc. These are basically a keyword based question. They will directly ask you keyword and they will ask your perspective in about 30 to 50 words, right? And second type of question is basically questions are basically on the basis of quotation based, right? They will give you a particular kind of quotations. Let's say, for example, life doesn't make any sense without interdependence. We need each other and sooner we learn that it is better for us all. This is a statement by prominent psychologist, that is Erik Erikson. Okay, so this type of statements shall be given to you in the exam, and they will ask your perspective on that particular statement in particular word limit. So that is basically a quotation based. The third is personal opinion based. They will give you a particular situation and they will ask what you ought to do or what you will do or what you must do in that particular situation. That is very personal opinion based. And fourth is good governance, crisis of governance. Like that is, they will give you a particular again situation when it comes to governance and public life, and they will ask you what will be your step in order to deal with that particular situation, right? So this is a kind of a graph for better clarity. So the majority of the portion is being held by the keyword based question, that is 36%, right? So each and every keyword that we will be dealing in the lecture series will stand very important for us to emphasis upon, because keyword plays a very crucial role, because it will help you save a lot of time while attempting an answer, right? Because let's say when it comes to opinionated type of question, when your opinions are short, in that case you still have to think and draw your framework. But in case of keywords, you can have your mental mapping beforehand and you can just reproduce it effectively during the exam, right? When the question asks for, let's say, constitutional morality, there is a direct answer to that, right? You don't have to do a lot of mental work, right? So you have a beforehand preparation for keywords, which will help you save a lot of time and also attempt efficiently any answer when it comes to keyword based question. And here you have advantage, comparative advantage related to all the other three parts, that is governance, personal and quotation. The second part is, which again asked majorly, is quotation based question, that is 25.6%. Again, this analysis is from past 10 years, that is 2013 to 2023. Okay, so with time, the quotation based questions are also becoming very prevalent, right? We have seen a majority of the question even in essays are being asked from philosophical quotations, right? So here quotation, the preparation of quotation also becomes important. So one might have these questions in their brain that there are immensity of quotes which is floating around us, how we can have an idea of each and every quotes, right? So it is not important to have an idea about each and every quotes, but the more important thing here is to have your mental framework. Let's say if any question related to any quotes of any philosopher, it will be asked, what is your attitude to that particular statement, right? How you are evaluating that particular statement, right? How your approach will be, and approach should always be a positive or a balanced one rather than a pessimistic or negative ones, right? So that is a more positive outlook oriented approach to any quotation based questions, which will help you fetch more marks in the exams. Okay, the third is personal situational based questions, right? They will be giving you a situation. Let's say you are an DSP or you are an SP in particular district, and there is a coal mafia or mining mafia which is going on, and you have found something and something. What will you be doing in particular case when you found out there is particular kind of mishappening which is happening, right? So this is a personal questions with personal situational question which is asked around 22.2% in past 10 years. So you will always be think about that, right? You will also have to think about such situational questions. So how can one prepare for it? Like once we go through the several slides or the lecture series, we will also be having some kind of situational situations, right? Some kind of situational case studies, right, where one is posed with lot of conundrums. What is conundrums? Conundrums are basically ethical dilemmas, right? You have to choose between right and right, wrong and wrong. Most of the time what people think what is ethics is, ethics basically is choosing between right and wrong, but no, it is not ethics. Ethics is choosing between what is right and what is wrong and wrong, right? Where you have to make one choice between two wrongs or between two rights, right? And there you have to make a very calculated choice to be more what precise and ethical, right? And the fourth type of question that holds 16.2% of importance is governance based question, where you will be having questions regarding how efficiently you will be managing any task when it comes to good governance. So this is some total of PYQs analysis from 2013 to 2023, and major four parts of ethics will be keyword based, quotation based, personal situational based, and fourth is governance related questions, right? So let's move further. Okay, so before really stepping into the theoretical practical approach of ethics, let's do some thought experiment, right? So this is a picture which you are seeing in this on the slide is a little bit horrifying and also concerning, because this infant is an anencephalic infant. So what is anencephalic infant? It is basically a part of hemisphere of brain is not developed while an infant is born. Okay, so what are the consequences of anencephalic infant? There are chances that there are a majority of chances that the infant will stillborn, that is infant will born dead. Okay, so is it always wrong to take innocent human life? Can we take organs from anencephalic infant, right? So there are two questions, ethical questions, which is being posed to us, right? Is it always wrong to take innocent human life, right? So what is happening that there is a disorder, right? There is a development disorder with which an infant is born, right? And is it right? Because so many parents, they just don't want to nudge their kids to go through all the sufferings, and hence they decide to take a final decision to just take the life of the infant, right? And it is, so here the question ethics comes in, like, is it always wrong to take innocent human life? And second, if we take innocent human life, can we take organs from anencephalic infant, right? So this is one type of questions which you will be able to tackle efficiently and tackle very justiciably once we go through the lecture series. Okay, the second is, what are our obligation to the global poor, right? What ought we to do? We know the rates of poverty, right, especially in global south countries, how it is on constant increase, right? And what are our obligations to the global poor? What ought we to do, right? This is again a question related to ethics. The third is, we know how prevalent the climate change is these days, right? So what ought we be doing about climate change, right? We are seeing how the consequences or ramification of climate change is being faced by the global south countries, who are already handicapped by various several climate issues, right? Like drought, the increasing global temperature, the cyclones, and etc., right? So what ought we be doing about climate change? What is our responsibility for them, right? So this will again be a ethical question that we will be dealing in the later course series. Okay, so let's get started, people. We have done with our basic mental mind that what is ethics to us, right? How important is ethics for us, right? It is not about theoretical ethics that we will be dealing with. It is also about a pragmatic ethics or practical ethics, right? So let's get started with the very first broad topic, that is ethics and human interface, right? What do you mean by ethics? The very first question, right? There is very innumerable amount of myths which is circumventing the concept or the notion of ethics, right? So what is ethics? For some, it is always doing good, it is doing justice, it is not doing bad works, it is not stealing, and etc., right? But what is ethics? These are the personal notion about preconceived notion of the ethics. When you ask to your friend what is ethics, he will say that ethics is not doing bad. When you will ask a friend B, he will say ethics is always doing good. When you will ask friend C, he will say ethics is not stealing or ethics is not telling lies, right? So there is a different concepts or different perspective when it comes to ethics from different point of views. But what does the term ethics mean in real sense, and why it is important to be ethical, right? So just think it out. Like, you might be having your own definition when it comes to ethics and importance of ethics, right? So ethics is a part of philosophy, the first thing, right? There is a broad subject or the stream, that is philosophy, and ethics is a part of philosophy, because when philosophy started, the ancient philosophers like Socrates, Aristotle, Plato, and etc., they all heavily emphasized upon the notion of virtue ethics, right? That is about living a good life, right? The eudaimonia, when it comes to Aristotelian term, he calls it eudaimonia, that the final goal of a human existence is leading a happy and good life. So ethics is a part of philosophy, and hence here they connected the concept of virtue ethics with the final goal, right? Or the final purpose of human life, that is happiness. So for them, ethics, virtue ethics was a mean to reach to a final purpose of human life, that is a human happiness or eudaimonia, right? So ethics is a part of philosophy that is mainly concerned with defending, systematizing and recommending concepts of right and wrong behavior, right? So to be very simplistic, ethics is part of philosophy that mainly deals with right and wrong human behavior, right? So this will be a very simple definition which will do justice to our answer, that ethics is a part of philosophy which is mainly concerned about the concepts of right and wrong human behaviors, right? So ethics is branch of philosophy that deals with moral principles again, right? So what are the principles that the ethics deal with? So the first principle is what we should do, right? In previous slide we have seen what we should do when it comes to climate change, right? What we should not do, right, when it comes to an anencephalic infant, right? What we ought to do when it comes to global poverty, what we ought to do, what is our moral obligation towards them, because we believe in the concept of Vasudeva Kutumbakam, where the entire world is a family. If someone is suffering in, let's say, some country or some place in Africa or Nigeria, what is our moral obligations towards them? To ensure that a child do not sleep without a food, right? So what we ought to do. So what are the three basic categorization of principle that ethics mainly does is what we should do, right, what we should not do, and what we ought to do, right? So these are basic three principles that should be taken into consideration, right? So why we are talking about this principle? What is practicality or pragmatic approach of dealing with these questions, right? So when, let's say, any situational based question is posed upon you, they will ask you, you are so and so person and you are posed with a problem. Let's say you are a civil servant of a particular district, you are posed with a questions that there is a person, right, there is a, let's say, old lady, right, whose land has been encroached and who is going through extreme poverty, do not have a source of income, do not have a food to eat, and etc., right? So what should be our approach to that particular question, right? So first approach would be what we should do being a civil servant, right? What we should do, what is our duty, right? Duty being a civil servant to help that poor lady. Second, what we should not do, right? We should not engage ourselves in any illegitimate act so as to prevent any such mishappening, because the encroachment of her land is somewhere the misdeed of a civil public officers, right? They might be engaging in some wrongful way, because despite knowing the fact that there is an illegal encroachment happening in their particular district, still they are not being able to take any step to prevent that, so as to make sure that no any such person suffer from any kind of such issues in the future date, because agriculture is the only source of income for them, only source of sustenance for them. So what we should not do, what should be our approach, right? And what we ought to do, what we ought to do being a civil servant so as to prevent any future mishaps to such or very vulnerable people of the society or anyone else, irrespective of their socio-economic stratification, right? So this is the approach or the basic three principles of categorization on the basis of which ethics generally operate, right? So first is what we should do, second is what we should not do, and third is what we ought to do, right? So sometimes in questions there are explicit questions as well. It's asked in GS4, like they will direct ask being a civil servant what one should do, right? So you can just approach with this framework and you can answer. Sometimes it can ask what one ought to do, what is a ideal solution to particular problem, right? So this is the basic three principles which needs to be taken into consideration. So what is the ethics? Ethics is basically a branch of philosophy which mainly concerned with the right and wrong behavior of human beings, right? So this is a basic definition and the three principles which is important for us, right? So when it comes to the epic, right, the legends of Indian scripture, we basically, the first scripture or first legend which comes to our brain is Mahabharata, right? So how Mahabharata defines ethics? So Mahabharata defines ethics is Atmanah Pratikulani Paresana Samacharet. So people please bear my Hindi, it's a little bit out of the way, but I am trying my best to pronounce in very Sanskritized terms, that Atmana Pratikulani Pareshana Samacharet, right? So what does this particular definition or the statement means, right? What is the definition of ethics when we see from this perspective, right? So this definition or this slogan basically means that every human beings, right, they basically seek for comfortness, seek for हैप्पीनेस, राइट? सो प्राणी मात्र सुख चाहता है, इसमें कोई दो राय नहीं है। संसार की शानो शौकत और राग रंग में सुख नहीं है, दुख रहित संपूर्ण और शाश्वत सुख धर्म में ही है। पाप से दुख और धर्म से सुख होता है। ओके, यह भी तय है। तो हम इस पर विचार करें कि जिससे सुख मिलता है वह धर्म कौन सा है, राइट? सो बेसिकली द बेसिक आइडिया बिहाइंड दिस इज दैट human beings are basically a man with passions, desires. They always seek out their benefit when it comes to doing or committing any act, right? So basically Mahabharata is saying that irrespective of you being good or bad deeds, one should mainly concern about dharma, right? What is the dharma? What is the ethics, right? Will I be ethical while committing an act, right? So irrespective of seeing any actions from very limited perspective of wrong or right, it is very imperative for us to see that particular situation from ethical point of view. Whether will I be ethical, right, while committing a particular act, right? When it comes to, let's say, example in the legend of Mahabharata itself, though Arjuna was a very virtuous king and etc., he had to engage himself in the war in order to eliminate the mishappenings happening in his state or in his kingdom, right? To eliminate the Kurus, to eliminate the Duryodhana, who is the symbolism of wrongs, right? So here, despite being a virtuous king and etc., despite having lot of ethical dilemmas that whether should I engage myself in this war or not, because the opponent who are the part of the war are my own relatives, my brothers, my teachers, my uncles and etc., out I be doing justice by killing them, right? So the Lord Krishna, the holy man, right, he himself said that Atmana Pratikulani Pareshana Samacharet, right? You should always focus on your dharma rather than doing something right or wrong, right? So this is a basic precept when it comes to Mahabharata concepts of ethics. Okay, Mahabharata perspective on ethics, right, which is considered to be a holy legend when it comes to dharma or ethics, right? So dharma is very associated concept when it comes to ethics of the Western world, right? In India, we mainly concerned about dharma, right? What is our dharma? So dharma is the very relative term, and you can also keep yourself in very comfort zone by quoting Mahabharata in several ways when it comes to attempting an answer on ethical questions, right? Because Mahabharata is the scripture or the holy scripture on dharma, right? On Indian concept of dharma, which is very related to the concept of ethics, right? So you can always look forward to quote Mahabharata when it comes to GS4 ethics, right? So this is a Mahabharata, or how Mahabharata defines ethics. So broadly, ethics pertains to what, right? So outlines what ought to be, right? So ethics is somewhere have a ideal notion attached to it, like what ought to be, right? Rather than what should be, rather than what must be, it is always talking about what ought to be, right? There is an idealistic essence to the ethics, right? The second is applies to conscious human behavior, right? We cannot expect an unconscious man, right, to behave ethically, because they do not have control over their conscious. They are not knowing themselves that whether or whatever they are doing, whether it is right or wrong. So right, so ethics, we can only expect ethics from the conscious human behavior, right, from the normal human beings. The third is broadly ethics pertains to how to live a good life, right? So the basic virtue or purpose of human life is how to live a good life, and hence ethics provide us a pathway upon which we can walk and lead a good life. That is the purpose or eudaimonia of human beings, right? And ethics pertains to right, duties and responsibility. What is the right of individual? What is also the duty of this duty and responsibility towards the society, right? So ethics will also talk about right, duties and responsibility, right? And the end is ethical judgments. Ethical judgment in the case of ethical dilemmas, right? When there is a choice which needs to be made between two rights and two wrongs, right? Whether you should support friend A or friend B, in case when they are both wrong, right? Which way should you choose? And the condition is you have to make a choice, right? In that case, ethics will help you to make a ethical judgment, right? Like which one to choose between two rights and two wrong, because that is a situation of catch 22 or a ethical dilemma, which is very hard to make judgment upon sometimes, right? So this is what ethics pertains to broadly, right? So what is the importance of ethics, right? So the initial questions was, what do you mean by ethics, and why it is important for us to be ethical, right? So why to be ethical? What is the importance of ethics, right? We have seen the definition that it mainly deals with the right and wrong behavior of human beings, but why it is important to be ethical, right? Why it is ethical only for human beings to be ethical and not others creature, right? So in the course of human behavior and interaction, one comes across two situations, right? I'll call it a situation for now. First is objective facts, right? Facts of what are objective facts? Objective facts are basically facts of maths, where you have very direct answer, right? That is 2 plus 2 will be always 4. It will not be 22, or it will not be anything else. It will always be 4, right? So this is objective fact. And fact of science, example, gravity. There is a law which has been established, and there is experiment, and if that experiment proves to be true, then it can be changed, or else gravity will be regarded as the truth of the universe, right? So these are the objective facts where we have a short answers, right? But again, in sometimes in life we come across some kind of subjective situations, right? When I have spoken about ethical dilemmas, right, where there is a no fixed rule to come to the conclusion, right? So their ethics will play a crucial role, right, when it comes to subjective assessment of different situation of dilemmas, ethical dilemmas. And being in the so much of a responsible position of being a civil servant, we several times come across such a situational crisis, like let's say systematic corruption, right? Where you are bound to accept a corruption or accept a corrupted amount. If you do not accept that, it will lapse and it will go to your subordinate, which can misuse the fund, right? So there comes some moral obligations to accept the fund or not accept it, right? And that becomes a ethical dilemma to a civil servant, right, where there is a no fixed rule or assessment to solve that particular problem. And that is very imminent in any position, right? You cannot go there and eliminate that. If you don't accept it, it will lapse, it will go to any other subordinate, and they might misuse it, right? But you have control over your action, right? But again, it is a corruption which you are promoting, and hence it becomes a dilemma, right? So how do you solve that? And hence your ethics will guide you in leading a path which can lead to elimination of such ethical dilemma and lead a happy life, right? So ethical, why to be ethical? So the answer here is to balance the subjective situations that sometimes we encounter in our day-to-day life, right? So hence ethics ensures fairness and just orientation of behavior and actions, right? So most of the time during the subjective assessments or subjective situations in our life, we do not have direct control of ourselves, control over ourselves, right? Hence, if we have our own ethical framework will ensure that there is a sense of fairness and just orientation of behavior and actions, right? We often hear about the terms like one should always have a values in their life and nothing should dominate their values, right? So what is a value here, right? One should be honest, one should be diligent, and etc. One should be hardworking. These are the values, right? So what are values? Values are again part of ethics, which we will be seeing in later series. But this is what the ethics ensures, right? If you have a value of, let's say, honesty, if you have value of non-corruptness, then this will ensure, irrespective of different situation, you stick to your ethical frameworks and values, and that will for sure ensure a fairness and just orientation of behaviors and actions, right? So, and the second point is makes such subjectivity relatively synchronistic, right? So ethics is very subjective. Sometimes it becomes very subjective to individual, right? What ethical framework do I have does not necessarily mean that the same ethical orientation will be held by someone else, right? But if we all have some kind of ethical orientation, more or less it sometimes synchronizes subjectivity differences, right? The subjectivity relativity in different individual, and hence it provides a common ground to come on and play a safe game, right? So 2 points, that is fairness and just orientation of human behavior and action, and second is make subjectivity synchronistic, right? Because every individual hold different perspective of their life, different orientation of their life, and hence through ethical frameworks we can all come to a common ground, right? Let's say if a civil servant comes from different place and there is a civil servant who comes from a place B, right? They might not be a culturally oriented, they do not culturally like same, right? They might have a different perspective towards different things, right? But if they have a kind of ethical framework, right, it will render them a common ground to come and play a safe game to ensure a better governance in their district, right? Hence here it makes a subjectivity synchronistic when it comes to ethical subjectivity, right? So this is the one of the most recent case example which I thought to mention here. The there is an association, okay, there is an association in many urban cities which is called as RWA. This is basically a residents welfare association which mainly deals with all the societies, real estate societies in many metro cities, okay. So there is a recent case which says that RWA in Bangalore bars maids and servants from using common area, right? So there are usually a common areas like parks, amphitheaters, clubhouses and etc in different societies. So basically what you will be seeing that the maids and the people, they usually take their kids and hang out in the hangouts in these common areas, right? So the notice issued by the housing society in Bangalore barring maids from using common areas raises several significant issues, right? The housing society said that it is difficult to see them hang out everywhere in the park, amphitheater, gazebos. Residents can feel uncomfortable when being surrounded by maids everywhere we walk. So right, so this is basically issues pertaining to all the elite societies, right, where they have the sense of uncomfortness when it comes to seeing a person coming from a different socio-economic strata like maids and etc. So this is particular elitist mentality which we are suffering from, especially in our country, right? So this is more or less a case example recent. So let's see what are the different issues, ethical issues which is related to such problems, right? So first is elitist attitude, which I have just said, like how we are suffering from such attitude where there is not a, it is not a easy task to get mingled with a person coming with a higher strata of the society, right? The notice reflects an elitist upper class attitude toward worker, particularly domestic helpers, right? And that is prevalent in many societies as well, right? There is a elitist society or attitude which prevails or pertains in many metro cities, right? In some place, yes, it does, because I remember once being in Bangalore, I have been to a society for a property, right, with my friend. So just by looking at the income slab, they have decided not to give the property in spite of him being able to take a property and bear the rents and etc. He was capable enough to rent out that particular property, but just looking at the income slab and the society which the person was coming from, they have decided not to rent that property to the particular guy, right? So that is kind of elitist attitude. That is the main concern. The second is casteism and class prejudices. Again, in India, one of the major issue is casteism and class prejudice. Like when you yourself will be a civil servants, when we will all be a civil servants, there will be a issue of casteism that is still having a strong hold in our Indian society, right? So how we have a negative prejudices sometimes when it comes to several caste and etc, right? So this is one of the major problem which is the issue of the present time. The third is imposition of will. The notice illustrates how the Residents Welfare Association can exert their power and impose its decision on marginalized individuals who lack the means to voice their objections, right? So here what the basic idea is that sometimes the people who are coming from the lower ends of the society, they do not have the means to raise their voice or objections, right? Their internal innovation becomes a major hindrance when it comes to raising their voice, because at the end they themselves have a dignity in the life, right? So just producing a notice which bars the people or mates and etc to use common areas and etc just illustrate the imposition of will of the upper class of the society on the rural marginalized sections, right? So this is very wrong, right? And the fourth is corruption of petty power, right? The notice exemplifies how those with limited authority can abuse their position and use it to enforce discriminatory practices, which is very again pertains to our present society, right? So this was the case example, and these are the various ethical issues with such notice. And again the question can come, the particular situation will be said, like you are a commissioner of this particular municipal corporation and you are coming up with a case where there is a worker union or the mates association who are sitting for a strike, right, demanding the abolition of such discriminatory notices on the mates or the workers in the urban societies, right? So, and the problem, what are the different problems that you will encounter and what should be your step to meet the challenges, right? So these kind of questions or the case studies which becomes very imperative for the GS paper 4, right? So these are the basic issues, ethical issues which can be universally used according to the different situations, right? When it comes to a class division, there will always be a elitist attitude, right, which can be talked about. Again, casteism and class prejudice, a major vice in our country which is still very prevalent despite being on the time of Azadi ka Amrit Kal, right? The third is imposition of will, how a big fish always try to eat the smaller ones, right? The fourth is corruption of petty power, right? So these are some of the ethical issues which can be talked about. So let's see what is the historical dimension when it comes to ethics, and what are the various approaches in ethics, right? From where does the concept of ethics emerged, right? Who were the propounder of the ethical stream of philosophy, right? So ethics is derived from the Greek word ethos. So ethos is a Greek term from which ethics is derived, which means character. It's the values and beliefs that guide people in their daily lives as well as how they make decisions, right? So this is a kind of historical essence of ethics, right? So it is basically values and beliefs that guides people in their daily lives as well as how they make decisions, right? So as I've already told you in the previous slides, how these components like beliefs, values and etc of ethics, they play a crucial role when it comes to decision making of our day-to-day activities, right? So this was the still prevalent idea when it comes to ethics, as it was the case in the ancient times, right? So ethics and the values and beliefs, which are the components, needs to be taken in consideration, right? So there are two major schools of thoughts on what ethics should be, right? So there are basically, sometimes we come across various notion of ethics, right, like doing good, not doing bad, and etc, right? So there are basically broadly two schools of thoughts which basically deals with ethics, right? So the first is utilitarianism and the second is Kantianism. Okay, so utilitarianism are basically the school of sophists, okay, who will be talking basically about the consequence of the actions, right? And the second is Kantianism, who were the philosophers of Kantian school or Immanuel Kant and his followers, right? So let's see what is utilitarian approach. So the utilitarian approach to ethics holds that any action is good if it produces more happiness than unhappiness, right? So basically the basic idea is greatest happiness of greatest number, right? If you are doing something and the end result is the more happiness than unhappiness, then the act is just, right? If I am doing something and if more people are positively influenced by it, then it is good action, and if more people are negatively influenced by it or impacted by it, then it is a bad action. So this is what a basic idea behind utilitarianism, because they focus on the end result, right? The greatest good of the greatest number. If there is a greatest good of a greatest number, then it is an ethical act, and if it is not, then it is unethical. So this is the basic idea behind utilitarian approach. So remember this, they basically talk about the end consequence, right? If there is a greater good at the end, or the greatest good of the greatest number, it will be ethical. If it is not, then it will be unethical. On the other hand, there is a Kantianism, okay, which focus on intention rather than consequences, right? As utilitarian focus more on consequences, Kantianism focuses more on intentions, right? The means should be good to achieve any end, right? The Gandhi was the flag bearer of Kantianism. He always focused more on means than the ends, right? The means should always be good, right? If means will be good, the end will always be good, right? That's why his major approach to for the freedom movement was non-violence, satyagrahas, and etc., right? So he always emphasized more on means rather than ends, right? So this is the basic idea behind Kantianism, right? So what can be an example? A person cannot tell a lie with good intent, right? Irrespective of intent, if there is a person who is telling lie, that means there is an intent which needs to be taken into consideration, right? We don't know because whether what the real intent of a person is. Despite him saying that the intent was good, he wanted to benefit someone, but we really do not know what was the real intent. Was there a sense of benefit which was inherent for him, right? So a person cannot tell a lie with good intent. For an act to be considered ethical, there must be no violation of duty towards one's self or others, and one's intentions must be pure. They will always talk about purity of actions and intentions, right? That is means to achieve any end. That is Kantianism approach, right? So do you think ethical principles are universal? Universal in the sense, whatever ethics or dharma that we hold, is it also viable, let's say in Western countries, in US or UK or any extreme Eastern countries? So is it universal? Does the idea apply universally throughout the world? So there is again two schools here, right? The first is Socrates school, which says yes, it is universal, right? Whatever, let's say telling lie is a dharma in our country, it will also be a dharma in USA, it will also be a dharma in UK, it will also be a dharma in Africa, it will also be a dharma in Japan, right? So there is a Socrates school which says yes, it is universal, and again there is a Sophist school which says no, right? The kind of lie which you are telling in India, which is a dharma, there are chances that the same kind of lie will not be a dharma in USA, right? So let's say more about these particular schools, right? So the Socrates school basically considers ethics are virtues of virtue, right? There are set of virtues among which ethics are the main virtue. Ethics is the top dharma or the ultimate dharma, right? The ethics are virtue of virtues. The ethical absolutism, there is nothing beyond ethics or virtue ethics, right? Ethics are virtue of virtue. So remember the term, it is called as ethical absolutism. So what is ethical absolutism? Ethical absolutism are the basic idea of Socrates school of philosophers, who basically regard ethics as virtue of virtues or virtue ethics, right? Virtue of virtues or virtue ethics. Then again there are ethical relativism, who basically consider ethics to be a relative, right, based on perception, that ethics is basically relative in concept, right? Like let's say whatever is lie in India, right, the same lie cannot hold true in US. The same lie does not considered to be lie in US, right? Let's say same-sex marriage is not legal in India, but it or considered to be legitimate in India or ethical in India, but the same notion can be considered legalized or ethical in Western countries, because they have different perspective about different concepts or different tendencies of the world, and hence it becomes very relative, right? So sophists say no, they are not universal, they will change on the basis of spatial and temporal aspects, right? because ethics is based on perception. So here comes two concepts, that is ethical absolutism, which considered yes, ethics is universal because ethics is virtue of virtues. And again there is a second school which believes in ethical relativism, which believes on no, ethics is relative concept, ethics is not universal because ethics is based on perception. And since every individual have different perception, the ethics will vary from individual to individual, and hence it will not be universal. Okay, so again, so why we are dealing with two concepts here is that we will be dealing with several philosophers who will be falling into this two broad categorization, right? And hence by knowing that which philosopher falls under which category, let's say there is a Socrates who falls under ethical absolutism, his main agenda will more be, his main agenda or main focal point of ethics will be more on virtue ethics or happiness, right? He will always keep ethics on higher pedestal than the other notions, right? So, and there is again ethical relativism, so who the people who are more materialistic in nature, right, we will be seeing Locke and etc., they always give a more relative notion to the ethics, that ethic will always vary from individual to individuals, right? So just by having that idea which philosopher falls under which category, you will be able to depict his main ideas, right? So this is the basic idea behind the ethical relativism and ethical absolutism. So there comes a dilemma for us, that which one should we choose, whether should I choose for ethical relativism or ethical absolutism, because somewhere both ideas are, or both the ideas are correct in some manner, right? That yes, ethics is also universal because whatever is ethical in our country, that will also be ethical in some other countries. At the same time, it is also relative because whatever is ethical does not necessarily mean that same idea will be ethical in some other country, right? So again, we are stuck in this dilemma. So how to approach this dilemma? Avoid controversy and choose Buddha's Madhyam Marg, right? He has always propounded the idea of Madhyam Marg. One should always take a middle path, right? Or the Aristotelian notion of golden mean, right? So some ethical principles are universal, that is Socratic school, right? They believe that yes, ethics are universal, right? So some principles when it comes to ethics are universal. For example, truth, honesty, integrity, and etc. Whatever is truth here will always be truth in all over the world, right? While others few principles may be subjected to temporal and spatial variations. Example, beef in a diet, right? In Indian context, beef in a diet is not considered to be ethical, right? Because we come from a Sanatana Hindu dharma, right? And hence eating beef is not considered to be ethical, but that does not hold true in Western countries. There beef is considered to be an important dietary practice, right? You will find all the beef intensive sandwiches and burgers in KFCs and burgers, McDonald's and etc., right? There beef is considered to be important diet. So it becomes spatial relativism, right? Because it is changing from one place to other place, right? Something is ethical in India might not stand ethical in Western world, that is US or UK, right? So this is ethical spatial relativism. Then again, second is temporal relativism. What is temporal relativism? Something which varies from time to time. For example, the practice of slavery. The practice of slavery was considered to be ethical in times of ancient Greek or in times of Aristotle, but it does not stand true in today's context. Nowhere in the world slavery is practiced, right? The second is again same-sex marriage or the legalization of LGBTQ in Navtej Singh Johar versus Union of India case, right? It was not something ethical in ancient times, but now yes, it is legalized, right? So this is temporal relativism, right? So that's it for today, guys. We have already done with the first part of ethics and human interface, and I am immensely grateful for all the feedback that I have received. It was really overwhelming for me to process each and every feedback, and I am looking forward to strive my best so that I can produce a quality content each day for you all people, so that you do not have to content hunt in the UPSC markets, right? So thanks for watching, people, and keep striving, because thus you strive, so you thrive. And please show your love as well by subscribing to the channel, that is UPSC Geek by NRG. And with this, we come to an end. Thank you.